How's it going, guys? A lot of people will write and they will ask me, what type of business should I start? But in reality, before you get to that stage, you always need to do a bit of research before starting a business. And so in part 2 of this series, I want to talk about what you need to research before you start a business. So if you haven't already caught part 1, check it out up here. It'd be good to start there. We talked about things like what product or service will you sell, who are you going to sell it to, what about competition, how to differentiate yourself, and other important topics. Today, I want to have a look at a number of other steps that are very crucial in terms of starting a business.
Subscribe now.
The first thing that I want to talk about today that you need to look up is startup cost. So startup cost is what amount of capital, what amount of money is it going to take to start the business off? You need to be thinking in terms of assets. You know, what type of things will you need to buy? You also need to think if you're going to need employees at the very first day. And often that depends on the type of business it is. For example, when I started Purple Cow in 2008, I let everybody know that I started a business creating websites. But in reality, the business was just little old me creating websites on my laptop at home. It was about 4 months down the track that I hired my first employee to help me out with web development. Depending on what type of business you have, you may need employees from the very start. So for example, when we started Delish Deli, we needed a team of employees that were going to do everything from picking up supplies to cooking to cashiering and other things needed to run a business like that. So you really need to look realistically at what is your budget, and if you don't have the budget to get things started as you want, then you could really look at how can I start off minimally. So maybe you don't have a team, but you're able to figure out how you're able to get started. And trust me, in just about every business, there's a way to get started in some way with very little budget, sometimes even no budget at all. But to be realistic, you need to think about how are you going to sustain yourself while the business is growing, and make sure that you not only have an accurate idea of the startup funds right at the very beginning to know that you have the budget for that, but you also need to look at kind of a runway of expenses. You know, how long until the business is likely to be paying your bills, and how are you going to support yourself until it gets to that very place. Second thing you need to have a look at is, are you going to be located virtually? In other words, is it going to be an online business, or is it going to take a physical space? So this is a good example of a way that you might think, well, I want to start a restaurant, just as an example. And you might start to look at the cost of commercial space. You might look at how many people you would have to employ. You might start looking at all the food costs, especially equipment costs, you know, ovens and refrigerators and on and on and on. It starts to really add up even for a small business. So you might say, listen, I wanted to start a restaurant, but I'm just going to give up on that idea because the startup costs just seem too high. But listen, don't give up so easily. What you might look at a business like that is starting off virtually. So in this case, what that would look like is preparing your food from a commercial kitchen. You could just rent some space, and then you would be able to prepare all the food there, and then you would be able to sell online through, you know, different things. Like here in the Philippines or Southeast Asia, they often use apps like Grab or Foodpanda. You know, in the US and other places, it's things like Uber Eats or different type of apps like that where people will buy food online. So just imagine how dramatically you can cut startup costs by starting virtually. And this really works with so many businesses out there. You don't always need a physical space ever, but you certainly don't always need it to start. So calculate your startup costs and your runway costs of how long you're going to need funds for before the business is likely to be profitable. Pad some more time because things never work out as easily as you expect, and then you could really decide, does it make sense to start virtually, or does it make sense to have a physical building, or would it just always make sense to just be a virtual online business? I gotta tell you, it just lowers so many costs if you're able to do that. With my businesses, I really need a physical space, but if I could avoid all that cost, it would save me a lot of money every month. The next thing that you need to research before starting a business is, what is your mission, what is your vision, and what are your values? So I don't have enough time here to really look at what each of those mean, but big picture, we're really looking at, who is your business? Why does it exist? What are the principles that it will run by? Believe me, these things may seem like they're kind of meaningless, or I could take care of these things later, but it's really important to have a clear sense of who your business is. In the same way that you want to know who you are on the inside as a person and what things will govern your life, in the same way that you want to know that those around you, have similar values and principles, you really need to know that your business is operating in a way that is consistent with those things as well. You're going to have so many decisions to make, and there's going to be so many things that challenge you and kind of push who you are, and it's really important that your business acts in a way consistent with who you want the business to be. Very related to this is, what is your company brand? So a brand is basically, if you could think about it in a similar way to a human being, it would be to say, what is that person's personality, or what is your personality? Every company has a brand, meaning every company has a personality. And most helpfully, I would say, you need to start with thinking through, what do you want people to feel and what do you want people to think when they think of your business? So think of iconic brands like Disney. What are the emotions that Disney triggers in you? Maybe when you were growing up, you went to Disneyland, or maybe you've seen Disney movies. How does their brand impact you? Or think about any recent Coca-Cola commercial for, actually not recent, any Coca-Cola commercial for years. They're always about happiness. Now, what in the world does happiness have to do with Coca-Cola and drinking soda? Probably not a whole lot, but it's really a clear part of their branding. They want you to associate happiness with their product. Or look at Red Bull. I really love what they do with their branding. I mean, they've really gone after a very clear audience of sports fans, and they put on Red Bull TV. They, have their own marketing agency that's just going to every event out there, and they've done a phenomenal job with really connecting people what their brand is all about. So what about your company brand? You really need to think through these things at the very beginning, and the most easy way to start off is by thinking, as I've mentioned, 1, how do you want people to feel about your business? And 2, what do you want them to think about with your business? Of course, thinking through logo and names and so many other things are super important as well. If you have any questions about branding and other things similar to that, that's what we do here at Purple Cow, so feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to give you guys my best advice. So this has been part 2 of the things that you have to research before starting a new business. As mentioned, if you already haven't checked out part 1, make sure and check it out now, and be sure to stay tuned for part 3 coming out pretty soon. Thanks for taking the time to listen, guys, and take care.